All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tales of the Taphouse. Josh, folks are having trouble hearing me. Can you turn me up at all? Thank you so much. Oh, wow. There. That's lovely. I think it's good. Is it good? Cool. Welcome to Tales of the Taphouse, Keeping Recipes Alive edition. This is in conjunction, of course, with the Laramie International Food Festival. My name is Emily. I will be hosting tonight's stories. And just to tell you a little bit about Tales of the Taphouse, we are an organization that features the stories of women, non-binary, and LGBTQ folks here in Laramie, providing a safe and inclusive environment to share their stories. And tonight we have a really exciting lineup. We'll hear from 3 local storytellers and a lot of essays that were contributed and actually inspired the dishes that have been served all week long here at local eateries. So it's going to be a great night. We're going to start off with 3 essays. And we're first going to hear from Dinesh Kumar, Angelica Meacham, and Ingrid Trahan. If all 3 of you could come up. Trahan. Thank you. If you want to come up and we'll just kind of go in that order, that would be awesome. So let's give it up for our first 3 essay readers.
Hello everyone, this is Danish Kumar. I am from Pakistan, and the story I'm... Too loud? So I'm from Pakistan, and the story I submitted was on biryani. So I'll just read the story. Biryani is more than a dish to me. It's a representation of my home, my family, and my country. Every time I smell the fragrant spices wafting from the kitchen, I am transported back to my childhood home, where my mother used to prepare this beloved dish with love and care. The recipe of our family was a closely guarded secret. It's not, I just wrote it for a story. Passed down through the generations, although it's a laborious process that required patience, skill, and the right blend of spices. I can still remember the aroma of cinnamon, cardamom, and cumin mingling together as a rice cooked in the pot. But it wasn't just the taste that made biryani special. It was the memories it evoked. Memories of family gatherings, holidays, and special occasions where we all come together and share a meal. It was a dish that brought people together, and the conversation around the table were just as important as the food itself. As I grew older and moved away from my home country, I realized that biryani was more than just a comfort food. It was a connection to my roots, a reminder from where I came from, and the tradition that shaped me. I started to experiment with different recipes, trying to recreate the flavors of home in my home kitchen. Now, whenever I prepare biryani, I'm reminded of my family, my home, my friends, and the conversations, and the love, and the care that went into every dish. And as I share this beloved recipe with others, I'm able to pass on a recipe of my culture and heritage. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, thank you for coming out tonight. So my essay is entitled Just Outside My Window. Snow engorged the outside of my home sewn hammock, and as I watched it swinging awkwardly in the latest of Wyoming's unforgiving snowstorms, I felt a pang of guilt. It was not created for this kind of pitiless weather. In a moment of weakness, I brought the whole frame and hammock indoors. Once it was properly dry, I laid back in its solace, closed my eyes, and began dreaming of Puerto Rico, the beaches, the people, and oh, the food. It all begins with sofrito. This melody of garlic, spices, herbs, and various vegetables is the base of almost all Puerto Rican cuisine. When it hits the bottom of a heated pan drizzled in olive oil, The sizzling immediately sends an aroma that waves through the house and seeps through the cracks of a home. Bienvenido is its declaration as it greets any who come close to the front door. But it not only beckons the living to venture near. On the ways of aroma, the tiding brings familiar faces to my peaceful mind. Tias, abuelas, and bisabuelas, those women who handed down their sofrito recipes, surround me and say, "Todavía estamos aquí contigo, mijita." We are still here with you, my little daughter. In my stillness, they were able to visit me, and through the folds of the hamaca, vicariously hold me. Mama Polonia, my bisabuela, leans into my slumber and whispers of the time when she wrapped me in her arms and hummed a nameless lullaby to her negrita, the little granddaughter whose skin was chocolate like hers. I recall melting into her warmth as back and forth we rocked for an eternal moment. My tia Belle stepped in next, and I couldn't help but grin. She was often referred to as la tia loca, or the crazy aunt. She prodded one of my earliest memories. On that day, my toddler mind had recorded flashes of color, smells of the barbacoa, and the giggling that my primos encircled me with. In the hamaca, they would place me, and like a pastelillo, wrap me up to swing me around and around and around, sometimes not so gently. It was a day full of white sand, good food, and most importantly, family. The last memory of my repose was tinged with a sweet sadness. My abuela Marcela recounted how her father had sent her at the age of 10 to work in the kitchens at the sugar plantation. Between meals, she was allowed to go to school, but as she walked through the towering stalks of sugarcane, she more often found herself in a secluded spot, making a bed of cane leaves and for hours resting her weary body. But guilt for being where I was at that moment, relaxing in the comfort of a house instead of a sugarcane field, was not the purpose of her story. What she and the others wanted me to feel was love and gratitude. The lesson they bore me was that they had lived so that I could live better. In my adopted home of Wyoming, though distant from the tropical shores of my ancestral home, I breathed in the delicious scent of arroz blanco con habichuelas y pernil, watched the hips swaying to salsa music as they danced on the streets of Old San Juan, and felt the humid warmth of a long Caribbean night, punctuated with the sounds of the coqui. Within moments, the wintry landscape outside turned tropical. The hamaca swayed in a warm ocean breeze, and there appeared as if by magic, a piña colada in my hand. Yet all the while, just outside my window, the wind still howled and the snow unabatedly fell.
Yeah, you good? Okay.
This is, I've never spoke before people before, so, you know. I've never spoke before people either. My brother told me I don't have any trouble speaking, so I should do just fine.
Good. All right. Take it away.
Well, I have basically two heritages. My father is from way down south in Louisiana, right on the Gulf almost. And then my mother is traditional German. I was born in a town outside of Munich called Erding, which was an American base, but I was brought up in Pasing, which is like a suburb of Munich, like Aurora is to Denver. So when I grew up, my mother would cook. She learned how to cook from both sides of the family, but I'm a traditionalist, and I understand that there's an awful lot of different cultures now in Germany, and I just tend to gravitate towards the culture that I was born in. And I remember my grandmother, my Oma, fussing because they they got some cans of sauerkraut from some people where she worked. And she said it was so disgusting, I don't see how anybody could eat that. she said you open up the can and you pour it into the pot and warm it up, and that's supposed to be flavorful. But in reality, you wash it. You don't eat the brine from your turkey when you brine a turkey at Thanksgiving. Well, you don't eat the brine from the sauerkraut either. You wash it, and I use a little stock, my brother uses water. You put very sweet apples, and if they're not that sweet, you put a little sauerkraut in it, or a little brown sugar. And then you cook peppercorns, and you cook that, and the flavor is just wonderful. I remember my mother, when we would go to Munich to visit her, where we lived in Kaiserslautern, the smell that I remember, I could remember it from outside. I could smell that. It was just reminds me of home when I make it. And then my earliest memory of my American grandmother, she would make a big pot of gumbo because there were an awful lot of relatives that came. And every region, really, of Louisiana has their own, what they consider gumbo. And my heritage was very, very simple. But I remember her going out, taking me outside, and I was little. We had just come from Germany, and she took me out to the yard and wrung this chicken's neck and let him jump around the yard for a while. And she told me the importance of an old hen, because fryers just don't cook decent and have a decent flavor. So you have to have an older fryer. And I remember making okra gumbo and all of those kind of things. And still to this day, the smell of that reminds me, because they lived on a farm. My grandmother, at 80 years old, would carry feed sacks on her shoulders to feed her chickens. And then things that I cook are still traditional. I like to keep the tradition alive, which isn't that popular anymore. But like my Cajun heritage, when you say Cajun, you think of hot. But that's not all that it is. It's the spices that they use to cook the food. And yes, it's spicy, but there's a lot more to Cajun. My father, his heritage, they came from France to Canada, from Canada down to Louisiana. That's who settled down there. So the word Cajun is a short version of Canadian French, which is what my father is. So I learned an awful lot from my grandma cooking, as far as, you know, the gumbos and how they use everything that they grew to feed the family. They didn't have to go to the grocery store for much. Another early memory I have back in Germany was my uncle would come home from work, and if there was a currant bush that hung over the fence of the yard, he thought that was public, so he would break it off. And my grandmother, my Oma, would make a compote of the berries that he brought and make roa noodle, which is a steamed dumpling. So I have a rich heritage, and my brothers and I tried to keep that in our memory so that it's not lost, and they teach it to their children. But the newest thing I've discovered through my neighbor Allie, because I searched for different recipes in the culture, my French culture, and they use an awful lot of fresh everything. And it's a clafoutis, and it's like a custard almost, with fresh fruit. You use any fruit that you want, and it's a real nice, cool thing. In the summertime, it's a nice, cool dessert that you can have on the porch with your neighbors. So thank you.
storyteller of the evening, Sarita Talasani Keller. So you may have seen Sarita around town in the beautifully decorated Ann Simpson Artmobile. She has one of the coolest jobs around. Sarita moved to Laramie from Houston, Texas in 2018. Is that right? Yeah. To act as the Artmobile educator at the UW Art Museum. So she packs up art into the van and art making materials, and she drives it all over the state through snow and tumbleweeds and mountain passes and of course wind. And it's just the coolest thing. Oh no. Among her other hats that she wears includes artist, educator, curriculum writer, community arts, cultural worker, knitter, stargazer, cat tamer, wife, and mom of two. I know you're gonna love what Sarita has to share, so let's welcome her to the stage.
I don't know what's gonna. Hello. So yes, I'm Sarita Talasani Keller. I am a farmer's daughter. I hail from a long line of farmers in India that grew rice. My parents came to the United States off the farm to Houston at 1969. And actually it was my dad for graduate school. So many of you understand, right? Going away for graduate school. Took a little while, so my mother joined him with my brother in 1971. And then later on, when they could afford me, I was born and raised there. One of the jobs that I had early on, because my parents came from rice farms, was as a chore in the house was to make the rice. So that required for me, as a young person, you could wash the rice, you could measure it, you could use your finger to measure it, and you would double it. And then later my mom got a Hitachi rice cooker, so that changed, but my job was that. Pretty much because my parents were trying to pinch pennies and save money, with a graduate student father. And well, actually, by then he was teaching community college, but my mom was an Avon lady, so she was trying to save money. So we pretty much cooked whatever was on sale as a rice and curry during the week. So whatever vegetables were around, and my mom got really creative. So one of the things that she did, which I still think about to this day, is one time we ate watermelon, and she saved the rind, and she peeled the outside skin of it and saved the rind part and cooked it as a curry. And I was like, what is she doing? And surprisingly, it tasted like squash. So anyways, so this is kind of what my weekdays were filled with. In the summers, when I was in middle school, I had friends come over, and as middle schoolers do, they get hungry, they open that fridge, and they're looking around to see what to eat. But my fridge was like no other fridge. It was filled with all kinds of jars of things, nuts, powders, pickles, which did not look like pickles. They were red. There were all kinds of curried vegetables. And there were a few things that I would consider very American-like in there. But I remember offering foods to my friends in middle school, saying, hey, well, this is really delicious. Try this. And there was this moment where they looked at it, and they looked at me because they're my friend, but they kind of sniffed at it. They poked at it. They were very suspicious, investigating it. And then finally I was like, that's okay, we don't have to eat that. I think I have bologna or something in the bottom bin. And one friend, in one instance I totally remember so well, my mom used to keep a jar of pickled jalapenos with a Cajun chef on the front. And that was one thing that she would go buy to make things spicy. And my friend did not want to eat any of the Indian food, but wanted to drink the pickle juice from the jar. And this is Texas. I don't know if this is a Texas thing, but I remember thinking, I would much rather eat this peanut chutney with, with idli than drink pickle juice. So on the weekends, though, it was a special treat because my mom would make chicken curry. That was the time that you made a special thing, and we would make puri, and my job was never to make the chicken curry. It was to chop vegetables, pick a piece of garlic the size of my thumb, not garlic, ginger, the size of my thumb, peel it, shred it, or put it in the grinding thing. We also had to like use a mortar and pestle, all kinds of stuff. I would just pretty much do what she told me. There were no measurements. It was just what my mom told me to do. And then frying the puris, which are like this dough that you make, it flattens out, and you make this bread and it fries and it puffs up. So I did all of this, but I was never allowed to make the chicken curry because I felt like my mom just did not trust me to do it right. Yeah. So growing up after that, so then years go by, I'm growing into a young adult. I just decided I didn't need to know how to make it because my mom was going to make it way better than me. So that was the treat coming home, was to have that chicken curry. And then at 35, to my parents' surprise and anticipation, I was going to get married because that was like something they didn't think about. But at 35, my mom had to give me she gave me two bits of information about being a good bride. One was she imparted information about the birds and the bees, but that's for another Tales of the Taphouse, the ripe old age of 35. And then the other one was I had to be able to cook a full Indian meal. So here we go. So I'm like, finally, you're going to really teach me. I had looked at recipes before, and they were all in like grams, metric measurements, and I did not understand. There were a million ingredients. So now my mom was like, no, you have to do this because this is the key to a successful marriage. So we went through the process, but she didn't trust me enough to let me do everything from scratch. She was like, no, you were raised here. It's my fault. I'm going to give you a spice pouch as a shortcut. But she did teach me how to make it using the spice pouch instead of roasting and doing all the things. And it was a success because I'm still married. Anyway, so during those early years in our marriage, we had neighbors that would have potluck dinners. And in Houston, it's pretty diverse. There's a lot of different kinds of people that bring their dish. And they asked me to make chicken curry, and I was like, oh, the pressure, you know. Are they going to like my chicken curry? But afterwards, my next-door neighbor asked if we could make chicken curry together, and I could teach her. So I was kind of proud and happy, and I felt really good. Of course, it would never be as good as my mother's, but we did it. And then fast forward to last year. My daughter is in middle school, and they have a interdisciplinary lesson project that goes across the whole middle school, and it was about the Silk Road. And so each classroom would be a stop on the Silk Road, and I was asked to help host one that would be held it's supposed to be in South India. And as an art person, I felt very comfortable dyeing fabrics and making designs. But apparently my daughter had asked her friends other things, and they had all said that I should make chicken curry and rice. And they were going to have a market stall where they were going to pretend to sell spices, but then the kids would all get to eat chicken curry and rice. So I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, are they going to be sniffing around at it? Are they going to be poking? Are you really sure? Because this is a lot of work. But yeah, she said, yeah, and she invited a friend over the night before, and the friend had never eaten Indian food, and she and my daughter and I made chicken curry, and I taught her how to make it for real with grinding all the things and toasting things and from scratch, not even using the curry powder packet. So the next day I go to pick her up after her program and to get the pots. And I find that there is a empty pot. It looked like somebody basically licked it clean. It was a giant stock pot. I'm like, how did they get their head in there? And then I see a middle school boy in the corner eating the last of the rice like a raccoon, like this. in the corner, and I'm like, there's not even any curry in it. And then another middle schooler came by and peeked their head in and found there was one little half leftover, half eaten rice and chicken curry sitting in a bowl, and they looked around and asked whose it was, and I'm like, I don't know. And they sat down and ate it. Someone else's chicken curry and rice. So I was like, what is happening here? I expected to come back and be taking stuff home and being like, okay, I understand, you don't get it. Yeah, and then that night, my daughter said all her friends asked for another pot because this was a 2-day program. I was like, I don't have any more. All I have is rice, and they were like, we'll take the rice. So I sent it to school, and my daughter, I was telling her, walking through this, and she goes, you have to tell them that we didn't even have bowls the second day. We just put rice in their hands, and they just ate it. So anyways, I guess, so with my job, I just, well, first of all, like, I feel like it would come a long way from my middle school days with chicken curry. But today I travel a lot. I do make chicken curry, and my kids always say, yours is the best, Mom. It's better than Amama's, which is my mother. And then we always go, shh, we won't tell Amama. But now that I've traveled too a lot, my husband has started making chicken curry, and he is a German-Irish man, American, many generations American mutt, and he makes chicken curry, and it's his own version, but it's based off of my mother's. So, yeah. And it's had so many iterations. I've picked up tips from Rachel Ray and a Betty Crocker even. But I do make it from scratch, and it's mine, and I'm allowed to make it. So anyways, I guess that's it.
Thank you so much, Sarita. Let's keep it going for Sarita. It takes a lot of courage to come up here and tell your story and share those intimate details. I don't know what's going on with this thing. All right, so we have 3 more essay readers at this time who are going to share about their idea of keeping recipes alive. Again, these are the essays that inspired the dishes that have been served all week long for the International Flavor Festival. Coming to the mic next, we have Marav Ben David, Adeline Jamaluddin, which, by the way, please yell at me like Ingrid did. If I get your name wrong, just yell it out. Neither? Okay, then that means it's Birgit. Yeah. So Birgit is going to come and share about a Swedish recipe. I see no Marav. All right, let's give it up.
Hi. I'm currently the only Birgit in town. There have been other Birgits, but right now I'm the only one. It's common in Germany and it's common in Sweden, but you don't find it in Wyoming that much. And where I grew up in Illinois, my sister's name's Mybrit, so it's Mybrit and Birgit. And people would call us Margaret and Margaret because it was way too hard to understand Birgit and Mybrit. But the Swedish side of my family. My maternal grandfather was from the old country, as they used to say, and he spoke with a strong Swedish accent. He was a wonderful cook, and at Christmas we were always treated to a full-on Swedish feast. I loved the pickled beets and the sylta, but my favorite was always potatiskorv, or potato sausage. My grandfather cooked up a storm. Later, after his death, my mother and aunt took over the duties, and my sister and I helped. Boiling meats, deboning them, grinding the veal to make a jellied veal dish called sylta. And in another variation, layering diced meat with broth and vegetables to make head cheese, which sounds really gross, but it's actually really good. And then washing the cod for lutefisk, which is a really horrible task because codfish has snot on it. everybody who who has a Swedish background and has eaten lutefisk has horror stories about lutefisk. But my grandfather made really good lutefisk, and I still get really nostalgic about it because it was really good. But my favorite was always, and for the whole family, was always potatisskarv. It's just ground pork, beef, onions, potatoes, spices, stuffed in a sausage casing, and boiled, and served hot. And there were never any leftovers. Everybody loved it. So I've been after 307 Meats off and on for a long time to ask them if they would make potatisskarv, and they did, and I am so glad. And I'm so glad that the International Flavor Fest happened again this year, and Deb and Allie very much for all of their help in getting this thing going again, because so much good food, and the stories today have been so much fun. So thank you everybody who's been a part of this.
All right, thank you for sharing. We do have one of our storytellers coming up next. This time we will be hearing from Samira Camano? Okay, yes. A creative at heart, Samira was born in Argentina more than 4 decades ago. She holds a PhD in chemistry, is a mother of 2, and cannot play a musical instrument. She fosters a passion for visual expression and thinks beauty benefits from simplicity. You can find her dreaming of one day living in New Zealand and building a pocket neighborhood from scratch. She's lived in Laramie for 10 years, but a small patch of land near Red Feather Lakes tugs at her heart every day. She talks too much, judges too quickly, and if you are human, she loves you with all her heart. Let's give it up for Samira.
I thank you all for being here. Can you hear me? I want to tell you today about my grandfather and grandmother. I'm from Argentina, but my grandfather was Syrian, and when he moved to Argentina in the 1920s as a stowaway in a boat, I don't think he knew how much of his heritage was going to come with him. And he arrived at the tender age of 16, not knowing the language and knowing only one person who didn't show up to pick him up. But somehow he found his way to the other side of the country and met my grandmother at the base of the Andes. And they fell in love, they got married when my grandmother was very young. And very patriarchal family that I come from, he taught her everything about how to be an adult, including how to cook. And she took the recipes he taught her from memory and made them her own. And they had 9 children together, 7 of which survived, the youngest of which is my mother. And so my grandmother taught those recipes, her version of those recipes, to my mom, and my mom in turn taught them to my sister and myself. And we try to remember how my grandmother used to make them whenever we try. My maternal grandparents are my favorite grandparents, which you're not supposed to have favorites, but since my parents are not here and my grandparents are not here, then just don't tell anybody. And the reason why they're my favorites is because they had such passion in the way they lived their lives and in the way my grandmother cooked. I remember seeing her surrounded by her children, most women, again, patriarchal family and all that, and how she would, like Sarita was saying, cook things without a recipe, and I could never inherit that from her. I had to like measure everything, which was my mom's job to figure out how to tell me amounts, because when she would just tell me, you put a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it would come out horrible. So she had to like come up with quantities so that I could inherit the recipes. There are a couple of recipes that I remember. I'm sure there were a lot more. My mom used to make dolmas, what you guys call dolmas. In Spanish, Argentinian Spanish, we call them wrapped children. That's the name. And so then if you have some Lebanese in your ancestors, then you would wrap them in cabbage leaves. My grandfather's recipe, you wrap them in grape leaves, kind of like the dolmas you cook. My mother used to make this soup, which I thought was horrendous, and the broth was something like really watered down yogurt, and it had this pasta in it that she would call it monkey ears because they look like monkey ears. So I did not learn how to do that, thank God. My children are probably happy about that. There are two main recipes that I did learn how to make, which is what I wanted to share with you today. One of them, we call it kupi in my extended family. And I don't know if you know this, but the Arabic language did not have a letter P originally. That's why a lot of times people who speak Arabic, they would pronounce, wherever there should be a P, they pronounce a B. And this is like a side note, but my mom and my sister and myself took a year of Arabic to try to connect with my grandfather heritage, and we learned this, and we also learned that the Arabic language started having a P when they needed to write things like Parker and Pepsi and the brands that started with P. But I remember my grandfather speaking Spanish, and he would use B's a lot of the time. So this dish, I've heard it called kebe, or kepe, and so my grandfather pronounced it in a way that we inherited the name kupi. And if you see the picture that they have shared on Facebook for this event, you can see some hands massaging some disgusting looking thing. So that's my mother, my daughter, and my niece's hands 2 summers ago when we went to visit Argentina, making this dish. It's essentially ground beef and bulgur wheat that gets grind really small, and you mix it together and you made it into a paste with like salt and other spices. And then my grandmother, I think my grandmother added this, is an Argentine little sauce where you chop tomatoes and peppers and onions really small. You make like a little salad, and then so you serve this raw meat and wheat together, and you make it really flat on the plate, and then drizzle olive oil and put some of that sauce on top. We loved it. Like, we loved it that it was raw meat. Like, we were eating raw meat, and it was so exciting. And like Sarita, like my friends were like, that is gross. We're like, no, you don't understand. This is so good. And then you could also make it cooked, and you could put a layer of the meat, and then my mom would make this filling, which was sauté onions and basil and walnuts, and then put a layer of that, and then another layer of meat. It was like a sandwich of that filling, and cook it in the oven. And it was fabulous. I like the cooked version almost as much as the raw version. But that's one of the dishes that I remember and I make, and my mother passed on to my sister and I. I was also thinking why, when I think of my grandfather, I think of food. I think it's because we're just big food people. In that year of Arabic that I took, I remember learning one sentence. I'm sure we learned more, but I mean, I know it sounds like we're slow, but it's like a whole other language with a whole other alphabet, so like we had to start from scratch, so we didn't learn a lot of sentences or words. But I remember one, and if anybody here speaks Arabic, please, my apologies for butchering it, but in my head it sounds like akaltu tufahatan kabiratan, and it means I ate a big apple. That's all I know how to say in Arabic after 1 year, and I'm happy that it has to do with food. That's all that mattered to me. The other recipe that I make, and I remember learning from my mom and seeing my grandmother make it, is empanadas. Now, empanadas is these hand pies that are very traditional from Argentinian cuisine, and you can put, the traditional ones have green olives and beef and onion and cumin, like the flavor of cumin is very traditional. And different regions of Argentina make different variations. Well, my grandmother would make those, but she would also make what we would call Arabic empanadas. I'm sure here that would be completely politically incorrect. But that we also love that dish with my sister because you also put raw meat in it. You cook them, but you don't cook the meat first like you do with the traditional Argentine one. So you take meat and you mix it with onions and tomatoes, and then lemon juice, bunch of lemon juice, and then you let it sit, and the lemon juice kind of cooked the meat. And then you put it in the dough, and you fold them in these triangular pies, and then you put it in the oven. So you cook the meat, but we were like, oh, we're eating raw meat because they didn't cook it to begin with. And that's one of my favorite recipes I inherited from my grandfather. And every time I make them, I have to call my sister and ask her for the proportions of things. And my sister is like, write it down. And I'm like, no, it's so easy. She's like, yes, that's why you should remember it. But since you don't, write it down. Because it's like 750 grams of meat and one of everything else, or something like that. Let's say I don't even remember. But it's like a really, really easy recipe, and somehow she got it down and I didn't. But whenever I go to Argentina, we make them together, because it's that one recipe that it's, everybody likes, no matter what your heritage, and we like to share it and then offer it to the rest of the people. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, and thank you all for being here.
Hardest working man in the business. I'm still gonna have you do it. Let's give it up one more time for Samira. Thank you so much for sharing. We are going to take a brief intermission here. There are some beverages that you can get over there from our friend Bella. And also, I just wanted to mention we do have a wild card opportunity. Every time we have a Tales event, at the end there is a wild card speaker. So you can put your name in, either to do a 10 minutes or less story from your life about recipes or a dish that is special. So that would be our storyteller wildcard. We also have an opportunity to do an essay wildcard. So if you had submitted your essay to Laramie International Flavor Festival, but didn't have a chance to read it today, you can also put your name in for that. So both of those bowls are at this back table here. It's like kind of catty corner to the drinks. So if you want a wild card or a drink, you can head over there. Otherwise, just relax, stretch your legs. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. we are going to hear from the communications coordinator at Laramie Main Street, Jennifer, to say a few words about the festival. So let's welcome Jennifer to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name's Jennifer. I'm the communications coordinator for Laramie Main Street Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization that supports our wonderful downtown and puts on events like this for the community. I want to thank you all for being here today, for everyone who shared their talents with us today as well, and submitted stories for the Flavor Festival. It's been an amazing week seeing everybody out and about downtown, enjoying new dishes, exploring, making connections, and that's really what downtown is all about, is sharing together in our wonderful community. And I want to thank Deb and Allie, who have put countless hours into planning this wonderful event. So, round of applause. And to our other wonderful volunteers that have made things happen this week, as well as our businesses who have put together these fun dishes, hosted events, and really supported this event as well. So, thank you for being here, and we hope you have enjoyed the International Flavor Festival, and we look forward to new things, making it even better next year. So, thank you all.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have somewhat of an unusual next guest. They are not present, but we have a video of them. So they couldn't be here today, Andre, Doria. So we're gonna attempt to play the video. We're gonna try to get our projector back. If not, we will just play the audio for everyone to hear. Yes, is it happening? So, oh no. What's my favorite food? Wow. Top three. Oh, look at that. Let's welcome Andre to the stage.
Hi there, mabuhay. I'm Andre from the Philippines, and I thank the organizers of the International Flavor Food Festival for this opportunity to talk about the Philippines and introduce its food to the world.
We are going to hear next from some of our tales storytellers, Lisa and Klaus. So Lisa, a Laramie native, thank you, and her husband Klaus have been adventuring in life together in Laramie since 1991. Both are small business owners, parents to 2 children, and grandparents of 4. Living in the same home Lisa grew up in, they now keep their German English and German Irish family tradition and recipes alive by cooking the foods they grew up with, though they may have altered and increased some of the seasonings over the years. Let's give a warm welcome to Lisa and Klaus.
Actually, we've been here longer than that, so we've been married since '88.
We don't need a mic?
I don't need a
That's
mic.
true. Okay.
So, go ahead. Start it.
I'd like to thank Allie and Deb for co-hosting the Flavor Festival and inviting me. I have a habit of talking too much, so I hope somebody's keeping time. My good friend Jim's not here with his little bell. He usually rings that to tell me my time's up. So anyway, I grew up here, went to school here, left for a little while. Laramie has an interesting boomerang effect. I came back, met my lovely wife, Lisa, and after that, we shortly left and went to Rifle, and then we came back in '91, and we've been here ever since. As small-time business owners, we love Laramie, we love the community. Some of you I recognize, some of you I don't, so it's nice to see some new faces. We're going to talk about a couple of dishes that we grew up with. Our parents taught us how to cook them. I'm going to talk about German rouladen, and Lisa's going to...
I'm going to talk about Fährchens, or Furtkins, whichever. He calls them one, or Abelskavers. It's a German dessert. They can hear me. It's a German dessert that my mother learned from my dad, so when he came over to this country. So you go first.
I go first?
Yeah.
So Rouladens is I should back up a little bit. My dad being German and my mom being English, when they met very young, and my mom was 18, my dad was 22, and both of my grandparents were in World War II. And you can imagine my parents' courtship was quite entertaining. Germans really didn't like the English, and the English didn't like the Germans. But they learned to love each other over time, and it didn't take too long. And my German grandmother, and you heard one of the other speakers reference German grandmother as Oma. So my Oma loved my mom and taught my mom how to make rouladens. And rouladens can be made a variety of different ways, but the way my mother made it is she would actually go buy an eye-round roast, and she was way better with a knife than I am. She would cut it into thin pieces, and if she didn't get it thin enough, she would take a metal meat tenderizer, if you've ever seen that little instrument with little points on it, and she'd just beat the heck out of it. And stuff would be flying everywhere. She'd be into it, and as I got older, she'd let me do that. And it averages, it's not really a uniform slice of meat, but it'd be about 2.5, 3 inches wide and about 6 to 7 inches long. And at that point in time, when she had it sized and beaten into oblivion, she would then season it appropriately with the seasons she liked. Her favorites were salt and pepper. So she put a little salt and pepper on it, and then some mustard, and then you'd get like deli ham slices, and you'd put that on top of it with some onions. Traditionally, Germans would put in pickles, but my mom didn't particularly care for pickles. When Lisa and I, we do the pickles now. We do hybrids. And after that was all assembled on there, you then roll it up into a nice tight roll, meat roll if you will, and you tie it up with cooking string. And then you have a frying pan with grease, and you brown up these little meat rolls, and you get some drippings off of it. Gives you a nice base for the gravy. We usually make way more than we can eat in one sitting, so we'll have meals left over for 2 or 3 times in the future. And you get these all fried up, you take them out of the pan, and you've got this wonderful base to make a gravy. And that was one of the things my parents used to let me do after they taught me how to do it, and something I still enjoy doing is making gravy. I'm the official gravy maker in the house. My wife will tell you what she makes when she tries. But anyhow, at that point in time, we get this big old casserole, not really casserole, roaster dish, like you're doing a turkey. Yeah, we never do turkey. So we put these 25, 30 of these little rouladens in the pan with the gravy, and you put it in the oven at a low heat, 250, 300, and you just let it cook for 3-4 hours. There's really no set time. We just kind of wing it on that. And after that, You can have it that evening, but we found that it's best to take it out of the oven at that point in time, stick it in the fridge, let it cool off, and bring it out the next day, and then warm it up. And it's delectable. You have to cut the string off, though, before you eat it. They will stay formed at that point in time. And the best part about it when growing up was not only spending time with my parents in the kitchen, but it was the smells. And it was the heritage of the food that they brought back from the old world, bringing it to the new world, and then passing it on to me. And the smells, I need to speed it up?
No, you're good.
Still under time? That's amazing. And then, so anyway, we got that all prepared. And then the fixings that go with it, we kind of did a little hybrid thing. My mom being English, she would make these little things called Yorkshire pudding. It's made in a muffin pan. And it's kind of like, not pudding in the traditional sense of what you would think of. You know, it's not like Jell-O pudding or anything like that. It's more of like a custard pastry type kind of thing. And they would puff up, and then the centers would fall down, and you'd have this little cup that was excellent for putting that gravy in that was so good that came from the roulades. And you would have it with blaukraut, and you could have it with other things, mashed potatoes, fried potatoes, a lot of variety of things that you could put with it. Sometimes you can even put rice if you want to go a little American or a little Asian with it or whatever. But it's a wonderful dish. It's very, very comforting. You definitely are going to have a food coma after you eat it. You're not going to be around long. And if you've done your job well, you really don't need to have any dessert, though occasionally my wife will make a great dessert. And I guess that's my clue.
I'll just interfere on this. For those of you that don't know what blaukraut is, it's red cabbage that is sour. And we love it to the nth degree. I don't make popovers either, or whatever those. I can't make those. My gravy in a jar is like wallpaper hangers paste. So we don't make gravy at my house. He does. When we're all done with that, we do not serve traditional Thanksgiving or Christmas meals. That's our usual Christmas meal, is roulades. But afterwards, my mom, when she married my dad, he came from the old country in 1921 when he was 13 years old. He taught her how to make these. They're called Abelskavers, they're called Fertkins. They're cooked in a pan that's a cast iron pan that has 7 holes and lots of butter and Crisco. Yeah, they used lard probably over in Germany, but we use Crisco here. And they are, the ones that we learned to make are made with lemons, lots of lemons. And you flip them over, you start cooking them, and then you flip them over, and then you throw them in sugar and eat them. We like them hot. He likes them cold. Our kids have never learned to make them. Both my daughters have the pan. That's a tradition to get the pan when you get married. They can't make them. So it's, Mom, can you make these for us? Yeah, we'll make them for you. So, but my mom, the very first snowstorm that would hit Laramie would be chicken noodle soup with meatballs, believe it or not, and the Fertkins. And the meatballs are not fried. The meatballs are boiled. They're delicious in our house. So, but that's what traditions that we have, and we brought treats for all of you.
So we're going to blackmail you to stay. We brought some Fertkins, Fruitkins.
We bought some for you when we're all done. So, but Carlson and I cook all the time, and we try. And we don't have we have measuring cups. Long story on that one. We won't tell that one. So we use our hand and we use our nose. We very seldom measure anything at our house, but we cook all the time together. If you come to our house, today it smells like lemons. Usually it smells like anything. The other day it smelled like, well, we tried. We did well. Chicken paprikash, which we'd never cooked. I recommend it to anybody if you ever want to learn something. That was a good meal.
Be careful with the paprika, because after it stews a day or two, it's really, really spicy.
Hot. But I want to say thank you to everybody that stayed and talked. I'm hungry now because of all the things talked about. This was really fun.
Thank you. And thank you for the snacks. Did not expect that. All right, so unfortunately, a few of our essay readers did have to leave early. So we're going to be bringing up 2 more. But before that, I really do need to push the wild card. You can go see Anita, or maybe Anita will bring the bowl here. I don't know how seems like she's going to do it. So we welcome a wild card storyteller here at the end. So please enter your name if you'd like to come up. I'm looking at those of you who haven't spoken yet, all right? And just a big thank you before I bring our last essay readers up. Thank you to Laramie International Flavor Festival for allowing this partnership between Tales of the Taphouse and your organization. It's been really cool to hear about everyone's heritage and traditions, and yeah, thank you so much. So we're gonna bring up our last ones. We're gonna start with Paul. Is that okay? Okay, great. Let's welcome Paul Taylor, who's going to be talking about Australia. Come on up.
Whoops. I got it. No worries. And no worries, we say no worries a lot, and that actually comes from an Aboriginal beginning, because my ancestors, being British, came to this last continent on the face of the earth to be colonized, and they were so unsure of what the landscape they were on. When they didn't know, the Aboriginal people would say, no worries, you take your sheep over there and feed them that and they'll be safe, and cross the river there and the crocodiles won't get you, and that sort of thing. And they used to say, no worries, mate. And it's become part of our national vernacular, but most Australians don't recognise that. So, but we're in that colonial time. This is a story from my colonial British Victorian 1960s was when I grew up, and I had to go to school every day with an AC/DC style uniform. My socks were up, and yeah. Did you have that too? Yeah, like Angus. And part of that schooling system was, if your socks were down, my mother used to make little garters to keep your socks up. And if you went to school with your socks down, you might get hit by the teachers for keep your socks up, Taylor. Yes, sir. Yes, miss. We listened to the teachers in those days. And this was also the 60s. Was we actually had a white Australia policy. So anybody of colour could not immigrate to Australia until 1968. That was never challenged until a national referendum turned that around, and it was because of the American Civil Rights Movement that came to Australia, okay, which affected me totally, and is probably the reason I'm standing here tonight, because of what was happening in this country. And my Aboriginal adopted father says in 1968 we became human in our country after being there for 50,000 years. Incredible stuff. So, and in honour of the collective, I'd like to tell the story about a person called Don Dunstan, an openly gay premier of the state who's equivalent to the governor. And he created 2 educational opportunities for me, an incredible visionary. And I went to university during the social revolution, that civil rights movement. I studied alongside Aboriginal people, and I ended up being adopted into a tribe, and I've got an Aboriginal father who I brought into the Laramie community twice. And he also created the Adelaide Festival of Arts, which is the biggest single festival in the world outside of Edinburgh, and that's where I got employed, and I met a man called Bobby Bridger, who was a descendant of Jim Bridger, and he invited me to Wyoming. So my whole history is owed to those 2 opportunities from that gay premier, which is incredible. Anyway, but this story that I wrote was from the 60s, from that colonial period. It's very British, and it's about lamb. I grew up in the 60s in Adelaide, South Australia. My mum, Ruth, now of 92 years, cooked a leg of lamb roast every Saturday night, and so did everybody else. The aroma of sizzling lamb with plugs of inserted garlic and abundant rosemary filled the house, along with the oven heat. And even if it was 100 degrees, we were still caught in our colonial culture because that's what the British did. And even though the climate wasn't part of that, wasn't aligned with that cooking, we still did it. And at Christmas time, when it was 100 degrees, we still cooked roasts at Christmas, and that's all changed now. So the country's gone through this incredible change. But this was the 60s, still caught in that colonial world. The aroma of sizzling lamb, abundant rosemary filled the house along with oven heat as my 8 brothers and sisters and I filtered in from various weekend activities: tennis, football, swimming, athletics, picnicking, and surf life-saving. We created a whole culture which is unique to Australia of saving people off the shipwreck boats, created a volunteer organisation, and 2 of my brothers and 2 of my sisters were surf lifesavers. Fresh rosemary and mint was hand-picked from the garden bed. Now, the mint sauce was very British. We called it mint sauce, and it was fresh mint picked straight away and then chopped up, and then you had it with vinegar and a little bit of sugar. And you put that on the lamb, and that was called mint sauce, which is really British. Fresh rosemary and mint was hand-picked from the garden bed right next to the back fly screen door. This garden placement was old British custom, believed to help the flies, keep the flies out of the kitchen and the house. And if you've been to Australia, you know about our great Australian salute. It's to keep those flies out, okay? Because they'll drive you crazy. They'll drive the tourists crazy, and we just get used to it, doing this all the time. The flies. The kids all helped in some way with the meal, peeling the veggies, peas, carrots, and potatoes, setting the table, washing up and wiping, no dishwashers, making and serving a pot of black tea along with dessert. And that was British again, right? Tea with dessert, and that was the job of one of us kids. All 11 of us, 9 kids, and mum and dad sat down together at a table resembling the Last Supper. No television, radio, all together, sharing the stories of the day, and that was my mum's thing. We're going to all sit down together. That leg of lamb fed us all with leftovers for our school sandwiches for the next week. And this was a magical time every Saturday that I grew up with. There we go. Thank you.
Paul. We are now going to bring up Allie, who is co-chair of Laramie International Food Festival, yeah? Okay, awesome. So let's give her a big round of applause.
Thank you, Emily, and it's so unusual for me to not be able to reach. There you go. I want to thank everybody in this room before I begin my essay for being such an important part of this festival. Your stories are the heart of the festival this year. Your stories inspired our restaurants and our community. And I feel as though last year we were able to launch the festival for the first time. This year, because of stories, everything was much more cohesive. And I know so much more about so many people in this community. I'm totally going off script. I met Angelica, I have to say, with a Puerto Rican essay, as we waited for our 9 judges to turn in their results, I was calling Deb every night and giving her the ranking of Puerto Rico. That's how much I loved your essay, and I really enjoyed reading all of them. So, and the international students as well, these events, I feel as though there's something here, something significant, and we look forward to having this festival again, and we would love to include you next year as well. I wrote this. Deb and I wrote essays as examples. because we wanted to show that you don't have to be a writer to tell a story. And so I sat down at my computer, and sure enough, I had a story as well. So I'd like to share it with you. It's very short. The color and scent of borscht fills me with memories of my grandmother. She immigrated here through Ellis Island 1 century ago when she was a teenager. Turns out that date is November 5th, 1923, and I hope on November 5th this year to be at Ellis Island to remember her. Although she embraced American culture, her wardrobe and cooking palette was infused with memories of Eastern Europe. Rich jewel tones, large beads, poppy seeds, and beets. Whenever she came to visit, she would spend most of her time in my family's kitchen, making jelly rolls and hamantaschen, knishes and stuffed cabbage, kugel and latkes. As a 12-year-old, I would have preferred Oreos to her poppy seed onion cookies and prune-filled jelly cakes. In a TV dinner era, I did not understand her fascination with these foods or flavors. Our home held on to this aroma, including her perfume, for weeks after her visit. Decades after her passing, I cannot eat any of these foods without remembering my Grandma Eve. These dishes reflect her own lineage, and a spoonful of borscht reminds me that this is my heritage too. I think she would like that.
Thank you so much for sharing, and also for putting all of us together along with Deb, right? Co-chairs. Wait, say that again? Co-chairs. There's 2 of them. All right, so we do have some wild card entries. So here we go. Anybody else want to put their name in? Oh. Is there a name? Oh, go ahead. So it takes a lot of bravery to get up here on the spot and share your story without any practice. So let's give a very warm welcome to Kyle Power. Kyle.
Yeah, I'm sure. Can you all hear me? Fine? A little up here? A little closer? There we go. My wife pressured me to put my name in. But when I think of food and my heritage, I think of one person. That's my grandmother. She's from Germany. She was born in 1940, and so her childhood was a little different than most people's. My grandfather, he was a good old boy from Illinois, and he was in the Army, and he was stationed over there. Met my grandmother years after, got married quick, had my dad, moved back to the States, and had 2 more children, my 2 aunts. And what I remember about her growing up and being in her household is she would never let us in the kitchen, ever. We didn't belong in there. She didn't want to, when she was in there cooking or baking, we were just in the way. So what I remember is not seeing her cook at all or bake. It was mainly the smells, good stuff like that. The one dish that I remember eating all the time is spätzle, is what she called it. I don't know if that had an official name. I'm guessing that's the name of the noodles. I don't know much about German cuisine or anything like that. But that would be the only place I would eat that dish. It would be at her house. And she would always say, well, later on when we got older and we started asking her about recipes and giving us recipes, she would say, well, if I gave you the recipes, you would never come here, right? Which isn't true at all, but she's quite humorous in that kind of stuff, very blunt too. And you know, I've never tried to look up the recipe, try to cook it. I still like going to her place and eating spätzle. And it was nearly impossible to get any other recipes from her. You know, I don't think she did much of German style cooking, mainly because my grandfather was, you know, Illinois boy, kind of just wanted meat and potatoes, and so a lot of her dishes are just meat and potatoes kind of stuff. But she does have a spritz cookie recipe and a I don't know, what other kind of cookie is that? It's like a jelly, what is it? Linzer cookie. She does 3 layers and then jam in the center. It's a red currant jam. Can't use any other jam. Has to be red currant. But my sister, who has been bugging her for years and years to get that recipe, finally was able to go to her house and have her cook and bake these Linzer cookies for her. And of course there was no measurements, there was no recipes, it was all in her head, and she was putting it in her hand, throwing it in there. She has the oldest oven in the world that you could set it to 350. There's no way it's 350. So so even when she said, oh yeah, it's 20 minutes, 350, you know, it's, you never know. You never know. But so my sister tried to transcribe this as best as possible and sent me the recipe, and a couple years ago we actually tried to make these, and very difficult to make. You have to have the cookies very thin, and definitely have to have the red currant jelly. We tried other jellies, wasn't the same. But it definitely brings back childhood memories, and my grandmother is 83 years old, and she's still jumping on the kitchen counters and standing on them, trying to reach pots out of her reach, and she's just amazing, and that's who I think of when I think of food. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyle. That was awesome. All right, well, that concludes Keeping Recipes Alive, Tales of the Taphouse, crossover with Laramie International Flavor Fest. We do have another Tales event coming up May 18th at 5 p.m. We're partnering with Wyoming Women's Foundation to share stories around maternal mental health. If you would like to be a storyteller for that, please pull me aside afterwards and I can give you information on that. Otherwise, just come and listen to the stories. And last but definitely not least, we have snacks to go around. So let's give a round of applause for all our storytellers.
If you want to pair those snacks with an alcoholic beverage or non-alcoholic beverage, go see Bella.